Welcome to Health Oddity, the show that strips away the jargon and hype surrounding all things health and fitness to help you live a long, strong and energetic life. Lining up at the bar this week, here's Peter Lant, Paul Bassett and James St. Pierre.
Hello and welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, episode 78. And we have got a very special guest with us today. A very special guest who I will introduce you to in a minute. But first of all, I will introduce you to the usual hosts, the usual co-hosts of the Health Oddity podcast. Mr. Peter Lantz, how are you doing?
I'm all right. I was we've got some storms coming, haven't we? And I had a funny day yesterday because the dog's been a bit poorly and it was really windy outside, so we didn't have to go out for a walk, which was quite nice. So he's all right today, though. I'm hoping he's going to be poorly again tomorrow because the weather's going to be even worse tomorrow.
Well, I woke up this morning and the half of the roof had blown off of my my kid's Wendy house in the garden. So
I thought you were going to say like your studio.
No. So we had to draft in the father-in-law, and he's been rebuilding the Wendy house today.
Well, a couple of weeks ago when we had wind, I've got one of those cube tables in the garden where the chairs go underneath, and it's a big cube. One of them had blown across the garden, and it unfortunately landed in one of Sid's turds. So we're going to have to wash that down.
Oh dear, dearie me. Mr. Paul Bassett, how are you? Have you been negatively impacted by the weather in Putney, or are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Talking of dog turds, my wife once rented out her house up in Manchester in Hale. And we sold it eventually, but when we had some tenants who didn't pay, and I had to clear up the back garden, and there was 120 dog turds in the back garden.
Yeah,
okay. It was insane, and they had kids as well. So God knows what happened. But on another note, I'm glad that we have our guest today because the ratio of facial hair and hair on the head is now even, because there's some glasses, lack of hair on the head, clean shaven-ish.
It's like the way I'm looking at my screen. Yeah, the way I'm looking at my screen, I've got 4 heads on the screen, and it's like that old game, Guess Who? You know, we've got me with bald head and a beard, Pete with hair on his head and a beard, you two with glasses. Yeah,
it's a good job. It's a good job we're not doing like, you know, those avatars that they do, which are like a shadow of a face. Because you'd see me, obviously. James would be like just a beard. Paul would just be like a pair of glasses. There'd be nothing else there at all.
Dear me. Anyway, the guest today with us is Mr. Keith Smith, and I believe Keith is in sunny Croydon in the UK. Is that right?
Yes,
Keith?
sir. Sunny Croydon.
Sunny Croydon. Okay. And I've known Keith for many years. Probably, I'd imagine it's about 10 years, something like that. Keith was at my wedding, which I think was about. It was 2015. So that was 7 years.
You should have thought about that before you started saying it.
That was 7 years ago. And yeah, I've done lots of things with Keith over the years. We've done training, providing things together. Keith has got me up to the Birmingham NEC to work at Leisure Industry Week with him in the past. I've done courses where Keith has been the instructor, the teacher, the tutor on the course. And Keith is a fantastic guy who I've known for a long, long time, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly well-read around training, and incredibly well-experienced in training people himself, but also training instructors and training trainers and running training courses and developing training courses and creating syllabuses and all different kinds of things around the fitness industry. I won't give too much away because I'll let Keith kind of introduce himself in a minute. But welcome to the Health Oddity podcast, Keith Smith. If you can just tell us a little bit about kind of yourself, you know, how long you've been in the industry, what you've kind of done to bring you here up to this point, and you know, any other bits of information you'd like to share with us.
I've just taken my watch off so I can monitor the seconds as I don't bore your listeners. Okay. So I'll always keep my comments quite short. So thank you very much for that introduction. That was lovely. I think we originally spent a day together at a fitness convention in Loughborough was the first time we actually spent some decent time together. I don't know how long ago that was, but yeah, many years ago. So yeah, I dabbled in the fitness industry in about 1989, 1990. I did my first fitness qualification in 92. It's actually coming up to 30 years in May. I was so nervous that instead of doing it over 2 weeks, I did it one night a week for 6 months. I was nervous about going back to adult education. I got in the industry, started working in the gym and teaching classes. I was then very fortunate to be offered the opportunity to go back to the training provider that I did my first course with, and became a tutor for them for over 15 years, delivering gym, personal trainer, and some special populations workshops. I still taught classes and worked in a gym. I still work in a gym today, Monday night at the South Bank Club on the Wandsworth Road. I do a bit of gym induction, chat to a few members, clean a bit of equipment. I then spent some years with Life Fitness and Hammer Strength as a trainer for those, developing workshops and product courses. And yeah, just today I spend my time supporting or a partner in a company called Excelsior, where we do digital learning and also face-to-face delivery. And like I said, I still do gym inductions, which I really love. If the gym instructor kept my wife in shoes, the gym instructor job kept my wife in shoes, that's the only job I would do. I love it.
And I think,
but unfortunately,
I was just going to say, Keith, I know that from speaking to lots of people, certainly in England, that I've come in contact with over the last decade or so, through, you know, either physical training courses or business courses or anything around the fitness industry. So many people, you've kind of been involved in the development of so many, you know, UK based fitness professionals and personal trainers and gym instructors over the last, you know, 20 to 30 years, that there's when I have a chat to people, so many people know you or have been on one of your courses in the past, or have attended one of your workshops, or have seen you do a keynote or a talk somewhere. You've really been a kind of a big part of the fitness industry in England for a long time, haven't you?
Well, it's very nice of you to say so. I have to apologise to all those people that in case I doing some sort of learning with me affected them in a negative way. I do have to apologise to all of those. It's very nice of you to say so. It's lovely.
So in terms of you coming into the fitness industry, you said it was kind of like more of an adult learning scenario or situation. Yeah. What were you doing prior to coming into the fitness industry, and what was it that led you to first enroll on that? So I don't think I've ever asked you this before. What led you to enroll on that course that you did one night a week for 6 months, or you know, that what led you down that path?
I had a go at sport that went well for a few years, and then because of injury didn't go that well. Because I was heavily involved in sport, school and education took a bit of a back step. So when it all fell apart, I ended up driving a van around central London. That was it. I was really good at it as well, to be fair. And then I think one day I had to drop a package off at Tottenham Court Road, YMCA. And I looked in a door and there was people who looked as if they was enjoying education in a room. And I said to someone, what are they doing? And they said, they're learning to be fitness instructors. So the following week I enrolled on a course. It was as simple as that. It was, that was it, you know. But I don't mention the fact that I had a background in sport, because I think that our industry, as the health and fitness industry, does need to separate itself from sport. The content might be the same, you know, and how we use content and we select exercise intensity, exercise choice, and exercise order. But I do believe that the context is slightly different. So I very rarely tell people that I had a background in sport, and anyone who's watching this video is probably lucky that they're seeing just my head and shoulders, because below this point is a very large amount of soft tissue, which doesn't really represent someone who ever did a sport in the past. So yeah, that's my background really.
And I think going back to, like you say, like 89, 90, 91, 92, that kind of era,
Yeah.
The fitness industry in this country, probably globally, but the fitness industry in this country, in England, and, you know, fitness instructing, and certainly I think personal training, you know, wasn't a thing, you know, back then. I mean, what was the exercise or the fitness or the industry landscape like back in the late 80s and early 90s? What did that look like?
Most people taught classes in either adult education or in church halls. The gym was a multi-gym at the back of the badminton court, to be fair. You know, that's how people got their resistance training. A few people had garages where they had a few free weights, barbells and dumbbells was how people did it. But certainly I remember the London club at Barbican being built in the early 90s. I do believe now that Nuffield might own that, but in the past I think Holmes Place has owned it, and please forgive me if I've got this wrong, and I think Virgin Active owned it for quite a while as well. So I do remember that being built, and driving a van around London and seeing some sort of industry starting to take off. Do you know what I mean? I do believe that David Lloyd at Heston, that club was built in 89, sorry, in 82, but originally it was a tennis club. I don't know when they sort of brought fitness into the tennis club, but there was certainly some rumblings of facilities being built that were what we would know today as the start of the industry. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, like you said at the start, which is very wise, obviously, to separate competitive sport and health and fitness into two things. And I know when we've had, you know, Dan John on in the past, and I know, you know, Dan, when he clearly sort of separates, you know, performance and fitness and performance and health and performance and longevity, and has them as two separate things. But I suppose prior to, I suppose going back into the mid 80s and even the 70s, and you've got the whole, you know, Jane Fonda kind of thing that went on, and in America you had pumping iron, and you had the bodybuilding and Arnold and all that sort of thing. But people didn't have, in the 70s and 80s, didn't actually have gyms, did they? And they didn't need to go to, but there weren't gyms available for people to go to. What do you think changed? You know, what was the genesis of the kind of the fitness industry as we know it today, really? Because many of our listeners, and some of them won't have even been born in 1990, wouldn't ever be able to imagine a time without gyms and without health clubs that we have today.
Yeah. It's a really good point. I remember my local leisure centre having a multi-gym at the back of the badminton courts that we all used, and then all of a sudden, a month later, they built a gym within the facility, and then they were asking people to pay money on top of like it was a facility within a facility, like a separate facility. I clearly remember that. I don't honestly know, James. It's a really great question. Perhaps people saw an opportunity. Perhaps people had more leisure time. Perhaps people were getting more educated in terms of, you know, the importance of health in terms of longevity and better quality of movement. But no, I really think that's a great question. And do you know what? I'm going to actually investigate that.
I think there was
go on, Paul.
Yeah, we've had a lot of guests, and when you look at like people like Mark Rifkin, Dan John, you know, some of those people in their 50s and 60s that we've had on in the past, and we see them as quite big kind of characters within the current fitness industry. But really, when you look back, prior to the 90s and 80s and even the 1980s, it was kind of a niche thing to be really into training. There were obviously people who, threw themselves into it head first and became very, very high level. And they often had a sporting background. So, Mark Rifkin had a sporting background. Dan John had a sporting background. Phil Maffetone, they all had sporting backgrounds. And I mean, we take the Sunday run and the kind of jogging phenomenon that's been kind of building momentum over the last 20, 30 years as something as a given. But in the 70s, we didn't even have the Nike shoe. And it wasn't until we had the Nike shoe, and there was a couple of popular authors who wrote about jogging, and women didn't even enter like marathons back in the 60s. So this is all quite modern, isn't it? This kind of whole health pursuit. But on the other side of the coin is, we've got an obesity epidemic. So
that's
as
where
we become,
that's where I was going to go. Do you think like through the 80s, that's when everything became like, there was more office jobs came around and stuff like that. So people start to sit down more, and then like you start to get fast food and delivery and like bigger supermarkets again, like hypermarkets and all that sort of stuff. And you know what I mean? So like the food industry was going that way. People were going to the butcher's less and going to the fruit shop less. We used to go to the butcher's, the fruit shop, and all that sort of stuff, like different shops. Booklesses, my mum used to go to, to get the fruit and veg and all that sort of stuff. And then that all changed and people started sitting down more. Stuart McGill was talking about this. People started sitting down more, and then that's when you started to get like sort of more problems. And then people, this is in my head, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is just my kind of perception of it, is people then started to think, well, I need to do some formal exercise rather than getting exercise through the job or, or whatever.
No, I totally agree. And I think all of you bring up some very good points. It's like most things in life, there's not one thing that led to something happening. There's a series of factors that led to something happening, and the fact that we may have been moving towards, that may have been the start of moving towards more office jobs, and maybe the start of what is now the digital age. And, has been brought up. Joan Benoit won the first Olympic women's marathon in 84, I do believe, which was a tragedy that they were kept out of, or females were kept out of certain events for such a long time. And even today, it's a real shame that perhaps women's sport still doesn't get the same publicity that it does on TV and radio that it deserves. So, I think there's a number of factors that led to the fitness industry sort of growing as it has done. I don't know what it was like in other countries. Maybe
I think they had the Nautilus system, didn't they? They come out in the 70s and 80s. That's what Steve Maxwell was talking about. When you think about it, the amount of instruction that I have to give a client, and any of you probably do, in order to use a barbell or a kettlebell, or in order to get the most out of that tool, as simple as it is, to know how to deadlift properly, to know how to do a back squat. And then all of a sudden these machines come along where you don't have the same skill level, where you'll just basically sit down on that chair and push. And you can't really injure your back. You can't really, but you work the muscle that's going to get you the result. And I suppose it became, suddenly gyms didn't have to pay for staff to train everyone in it. And you could just say, pay me a membership and let the machine do the work,
Yeah. So, in terms of that came about, most definitely. I do remember seeing my first cross trainer, seeing my first stepper in the gym, most definitely seeing my first recumbent bike. Treadmills always seem to be about in one shape or form. But and then the Nautilus, and how Nautilus use cams and pulleys to help create the resistance on the body in different positions. That certainly helped out, most definitely.
So what I wanted to talk to you as well, Keith, was about is, I know obviously when you're doing training with trainers, and I know we spoke to Russ, one of the trainers at Unique Results, yesterday when you popped in, and I think you've done some training with him just a few years ago at Soho House up in London, you know. So you go into these facilities and you teach the trainer or the, you know, how to get the most out of maybe the equipment that's there and how to teach, you know, the physical nature of the exercise. But one thing that has always stood out for me about you is that you kind of understand and you reinforce and you teach that actually, as a fitness instructor, as a personal trainer, as a coach, it's about so much more than this is how you do a deadlift, or this is how you use a chest press, or this is how you set yourself up on a cross trainer, or whatever it is. I mean, where did you originally kind of start going down that route? I mean, or were you taught that when you first did your first course back in 1992, or is this something that you kind of developed and you noticed when you started actually working in the industry and in a gym and working with real people? When did this sort of side reignite your passion about it, I suppose?
I suppose it over the years, my thought process has changed, and there are so many great people in our industry who are talking about the science of exercise that I think my background doesn't allow me to understand the science of exercise in the way that the people that you've just mentioned, Dan John, Mathatone, people like that. Although I do believe the science of exercise is important, because any program that I write for someone needs to be individualized and it needs to be safe and effective. There's no doubt about that. But for me, there's been a growing awareness over the last 10, 15 years that maybe there's a lot more in how we do things rather than what we do. I'm a great believer in the environments that I create when I'm an instructor. And by environments, I mean two sorts of environments. There's the physical environment, the lighting, the flooring, the music, as Paul's just said, the equipment, and where I choose in the gym to train that individual so they feel comfortable. But there's also the environment in terms of the one-to-one relationship, where I position myself, what I say, how I say it, my voice tone, my voice pace. And I truly believe that the experience is the most important thing. And there is an experience in the content, but there's also an experience in how it's delivered. It's not just about what we do. And that's been coming on for about 10 or 15 years. Just in terms of reading and the people that I've been fortunate to be influenced by. So I truly believe that. Half of my own development now is still around keeping on top of the science of exercise, and half of my own development is around what else can be done to create the experience. And that's not everyone's cup of tea.
I love that, because that's going to resonate with both trainers who'll be listening to this and the end user, and which will be hopefully most of our listeners. And so I train groups mainly, because one-to-one, if you get a person when you're doing one-to-one who you don't really not necessarily gel with, but conversation can be a bit stilted sometimes, can't it? If you've got nothing in common or anything. But if you've got a group of people who are all 4 or 5 people who are all quite similar, then it just flows and they get on and they start asking questions of each other and what have you, and you create an environment. And I think that's brilliant, because as a trainer, if you can create that, it sells itself. Yeah. But as an individual as well, who's joining something, if you're joining something, you're like, I really don't want to go to this. And people don't a lot of people don't want to do fitness anyway. Yeah. So and then they go along and do it, and they're like, oh, for God's sake, I've got this drill instructor and it's a nightmare. And it's like, well, ditch him and go and find someone, find a group that you like James's group or Paul's group or whatever. You can see that everyone loves it. Yeah. And that's what they go for.
I think it's undisputed now. Feelings drive behavior.
Yeah.
Right. When I purchase something and my wife questions me why I purchased it, I will put logic on the argument. So once we purchase something, we put logic on the argument. Yeah. We always do. I bought a new car recently. it's new to me. It's not new. It's new to me. You know, and she said, so why did you decide on that car? So it was all about logic. We've got a small garage. It fits in the garage. We live in central London. I gave it loads of logic. But to be fair, Peter, I bought it because I sat in it, caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and thought, do you know what? You look sexy in that car. You know what I mean?
I love that.
You know, and it made me feel sexy, naughty. I felt naughty in it. And I think it's undisputed now that feelings drive behavior. And yes, there are feelings related to content. If I get the content wrong, exercise choice, exercise order, exercise intensity, and I make someone feel ugly, awkward, or uncomfortable, they are not going to come back. You know, and I like to think about it in the concept of, and this is my concept of flow, it's not the original, but if you read the book Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he talks about that channel of flow that's a fine balance between intensity and complexity. And in that channel of flow, sort of hours seem like minutes, and your worries of the day fall away from yourself and your sense of self becomes stronger. So there is a lot to do with content in our industry. But I do agree, Peter, that a lot of people just don't get on with the instructor. And I think you're right. Find someone else. You know, you might want an experience that is absorbing. You might want an experience that's thrilling. You might want an experience that is distracting. You also might want an experience as a learning experience where you grow and develop and you get a better sense of self and more self-confidence and belief. Find the instructor that that does that for you. Is it in a group environment? Is it one-to-one? I do believe that that it is about the experience, and experiences are led by feelings. You know, Joseph Pine in his book The Experienced Economy defines experiences as feelings being a factor of demand, and I do believe we have to think about the feelings in the session, because feelings drive behavior, and it's that fine balance between content and context. And far too often in our industry, we think about the content, you know, but it isn't just about the content is important. Oh, I like to think about it in the programs that I write for people, help them achieve their goals over time. My behaviors drive them back for the next session. And that's the way I like to think about it. You know, and there are far more people who dislike the way I teach than like the way I teach. But I don't need everyone to like what I do to pay the mortgage. I just need people who like what I do to continually come back. I think
I watched a great video yesterday. It just came up on my Facebook feed, as things do, of Steve Jobs getting a very prying question from an audience member who was obviously a programmer who was very angry about something being removed from the Apple system because he thought it was a very valuable tool, and he was quite annoyed in his question. But then, you know, I've never been a big fan of Steve Jobs, but he was obviously incredibly talented and knew his stuff. But, you know, he started talking about, you know, what is the value of things if they don't make the end user really appreciate the experience? You know, you can have the best programming language, you have the most fancy technology, but rather than building from the technology backwards, try and think of what the experience is and fulfill that experience. And obviously the technology will rise to the challenge, and that's obviously why he's built this massive ecosystem. And I think when we all talk, certainly if you're running a small business, you kind of have to start with the customer experience, because they probably, as much as it's very important that someone has optimal deadlift technique and optimal bicep elbow placement, you know, in a curl or whatever it is you're trying to come up with to make yourself sound like you know what you're doing, in the end, as you say, that person has to be listened to. They have to have something that makes them feel like they're going in the direction they want to go in. And I tell people it doesn't matter how you feel, but I know it does matter how they feel, because that's how they're making decisions. It's just knowing the balance, you know. It's often what's making them get in touch with you. It's not necessarily the best driver of progress, but it's certainly the thing that makes them make a decision initially to maybe start working with you.
No, you know, I spot on. I couldn't agree more. And you know, it is about It is about that people have to find things they like to do. No one in our industry has to do, no one who comes to use a facility has to do anything they dislike to do, they dislike doing, and they have to find something that they enjoy doing. It's as simple as that, you know.
It's funny because I had a conversation with a lady today who's been coming to me for a while. Number one, she likes to have banter and she likes to moan about stuff, but just to wind me up, right? And I don't necessarily train her the same as I train everyone else. And for me, it feels like she's not necessarily getting enough out of it, strength-wise and what have you. But at the end of the session today, she was like, that was a great session. So I'm like, right, that's my job. That's fine. You've enjoyed yourself. You've loved it. She pays me money. She volunteers somewhere else. And what they've started doing is taking up more of her time. And they've said, oh, that thing you were volunteering for, you're really good at. We want you to do this and this as well. So the thing she initially volunteered for, she's not really doing anymore. And it's turned into an unpaid job that she doesn't like, she doesn't enjoy doing. You know what I mean? So, and she said to me today, she goes, I'm thinking of ditching the volunteering because I'm not enjoying it. And it would free up more time to come and do more stuff like what I do with you and look after myself. And I was like, that is exactly it. Yeah. So what you've just said there, like, do things that make you feel good. And even if you think, well, I'm volunteering, it's a good thing to do. If it's making you feel bad, you know, you've got to look at it from like what makes you the most productive for the trainer, for the end user, for everything. So yeah, I
suppose we can't have a short. I suppose the only caveat I would say is we've got to make sure that how you feel, something that makes you feel good in the moment is something different that makes you feel good over time.
Yeah,
and sometimes you've got to have that distinction because sometimes in the moment it doesn't feel good at all. Well, as we all know from our own training experiences.
I suppose, but that's when you get to a certain point and then you become a bit sadistic, but for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a couple of things from the conversation so far. That one of the things, obviously, that Keith was talking about there is many people have said it in many different ways, but it's kind of like, you know, a fairly good exercise program done consistently over time is better than the perfect exercise program that's done once a month, you know, or that you avoid doing. So it is about the experience. It's about doing something. And then the other thing that you mentioned, I suppose, from what Paul just said, is that there is, I suppose, a delayed gratification, isn't there? You know, there's knowing what, you know, you could say that a chocolate bar tastes great when you eat it, but you know that, and training, maybe eating a chocolate bar in the moment is more enjoyable than doing a training session in the moment. But the delayed gratification and the long-term progress and enjoyment you will get through developing yourself. And it's not saying never eat a chocolate bar, obviously, but it's saying, you know, the training that you may put in now will benefit you further down the line. All the conversations we've had over the years about longevity and all that sort of thing. So I think having to enjoy the process is one of the main things, because if you don't enjoy the process and the process is horrible and the process is demeaning and the process is painful, then you're certainly not going to pay money to do it, and you're not going to do it. Keith, what do you think in terms of?
Well, I'm going to have to stop now, because now if I go now, I'm just going to go for it, because you've just lit the blue touch paper and you just want to step away.
Go on. I want to hear it.
What you got? Give it with both barrels. Come on.
I totally am aware of the benefits of intensity. You cannot get away from the fact that intensity is a factor to achieving goals. However, I'm probably not going to get this is going to be my Jerry Maguire moment. I'm not going to get any more work after saying this. I do believe that consistency and frequency of behavior is the major things that we should focus on for our clients, because they're going to achieve their goals if we can we can support them in building their confidence. If their confidence goes up, they're more likely to change their behavior and exercise more often. And sometimes I do believe, as an industry, when I read the press and some of the magazines, that we seem to be obsessed in some way with intensity. One session, and I think Vern Gambetta said this, one session doesn't make a client, but one session can certainly break a client. And I truly believe that as an industry, for success for everyone, the most important person, the end user, plus success for the facility and for success of the trainers, is about how we plan and deliver for consistency and frequency of behavior, and stop all this bumfluffery around intensity all the time. Intensity is important, but Dr. Rod Dishman, even back in the early 90s, was questioning intensity for complete beginners in terms of how off-putting it might be. So I'm sorry, you just licked the blue touch paper there, and you've probably just lost loads of listeners to your podcast because I've gone for it.
No, I 100%. We on the wall at the gym, one of our training principles is consistency beats intensity, and that's what we talk about. I mean, obviously with Phil Maffetone on here, with Paul McElroy, comfort zone expansion and all of this sort of thing. We 100% agree with that. I mean, I think that is probably, and you'll know this through all your experience. I think and it's not people trying to put people off exercise, because I think I was probably guilty of it when I first started, 22, 23 years ago, whatever it was. I was a young guy in his early 20s trying to train people in their 50s, had no idea really what I was doing. And they'd come in, and you think that as a young person, you think that training someone hard and making them work hard is the sign of a successful session. And that is just, like you say, it just scares so many. First of all, it scares off people who actually end up having the guts to walk through the door in the first place. But it just kind of exemplifies this image that most people who are put off of exercise and don't go into gyms have, of gyms being places where people go to work very, very hard, sweat, get out of breath, push themselves to almost being sick, or, and it just makes most normal people think that is not a place that I want to go in a million years. It sounds horrible, So no, 100% behind the consistency and the frequency, which is why, I mean, we can talk about the whole kind of Tabata and HIIT craze and all this sort of stuff that just went mad it's probably 10 years ago now. But I think certain people are moving well away from that now.
Well, they've criticized Tabata, haven't they? They've turned Tabata from its original thing of 20 seconds hard effort into something that's like a marathon.
It's funny though, because it'd be interesting to hear from Keith what you've seen over the years, because obviously fads come and go, or not. Well, you can't really say fads.
Trends.
Yeah, trends. Because someone told me kettlebells were a fad once, and I was like, really? Been around for like 300 years. So anyway, but I've just lost my train of thought there. But it's like, like things like that come in and then they go away again, and this is where this comes from, because I've had a guy start with me this month. And at the end of a session, he's like, "Oh, that was weird, because I feel a bit strong in that, but I don't feel sweaty and horrible and all that." And I'm like, "You don't need to. That's not that's not the goal. The goal isn't it. In some sessions you will do, but that'll be very few and far between. Maybe it's once a month. Most of them you'll be leaving, and you'll be like, "God, I don't even feel like I need a shower." So it'll be interesting to hear from Keith what you've seen over the years, because obviously when you first started, were people going for the high intensity stuff, or did that come in as people got more busy, I suppose?
It's a very good question. I do remember the industry being very obsessed with volume, and we were a volume-based industry for many years. And then, as James has just said on the call, then we started to look more about intensity.
So hang on. We need the hammer, James, because some of our listeners won't get this. So volume is the amount of work you do. So it's
low level long duration, where you could probably manage a conversation with the person next to you while you was exercising.
Yeah.
That's what I would consider to be volume.
Yeah.
On a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being low and 10 being maximum, probably working around a 5 or a 6, no higher than a 7. So it wasn't discomforting, but breathing went up. You felt warm, maybe, you could hold a conversation. So I do remember that era quite a lot. And then as has been mentioned already, we moved towards being more intensity. So on that 0 to 10 scale, it sort of went above 7 towards 8, 9, and 10. And there are huge benefits from doing that. I fully understand that. But it's not for everyone, and it's certainly not every day. And my belief is, that it's about the experience.
I tell my clients, particularly ones I train online and remote training, I want your workouts to always feel like you could succeed in them at any given day, even when you're feeling a bit under the weather or whatever, and you're not firing on all cylinders. But I want your workout eventually to be harder than anyone else be greater than any of their maxes. But it's just something you do every time you show up. And that will take probably a year to 2 years. but there's always the same kind of training intensity is within around 5 or 6, maybe 7 on a given day. But the fact is they're just doing mental things because they've been so consistent,
Yeah, no, agreed.
And I think as the intensity goes up, obviously, injury risk goes up, doesn't it? Depending on the complexity of the movements that you're doing. But we haven't touched on, we haven't mentioned CrossFit at all, in terms of that was obviously a massive shift kind of 10, 15 years ago. And it's certainly in the last 5 years has been huge. That really is kind of intensity above all else, almost, in some circumstances. But I think that what I love about the work that you've done, Keith, and the way that and it's who I work with, mainly people over 50, people over 60. We've got members over 70. So for me, it's trying to look at the very normal individual, not, like you say, that's why I loved at the start when you kind of made that sort of specific separation between sport and performance and health and fitness. I think a lot of normal people see how athletes train and how the super fit train and want to try and emulate that. And I think in some ways, many trainers see how athletes train and they want to get normal everyday people to train like that, when the trainer is less experienced or inexperienced. So I think that kind of consistency and frequency is by far the most important thing, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think hopefully it's come across in the time that we've been talking. I train the general population, someone who between 18 and whatever, apparently healthy, who may have had a bad experience in the past with exercise, maybe at school or college or university, who could probably, commit to coming to a facility 1.2, 1.4 times a week in the first year. And if you're lucky enough to keep them in the second year, they come twice a week. This is the main bulk of our industry, and going back to CrossFit, if I may, I think there's a huge amount of trainers, if trainers are listening to this podcast, and I hope they are, because there's some wonderful stuff that you've brought up today. I think there's a lot to learn from CrossFit in terms of how you tell your story. They clearly know their audience, they clearly know their identity and their culture, and they clearly understand the material that they're going to use. And any trainer who's going to be successful in our industry needs to know their audience, needs to know their culture, their identity and their values, and then needs to fully understand the material that they're going to use in line with the first two. So, you know, I don't know where they are now and what they're doing now. But certainly in those early days in which CrossFit grew across the world, there was a lot to learn. Even if you didn't like the intensity stuff from them, I thought there was a huge amount to learn for trainers who want to be successful.
I think as well, one thing they did, and they still do, I'm sure, you know, do very well, is the whole, you know, community is a massive part of CrossFit, and also, you know, competition, you know, and competition not necessarily with, you know, your peers and other people within the club, but competition with self and, you know, reaching for you know, a level of performance and things. So all these things can be scaled, but like you say, it's not like just because you admire something about someone or something doesn't mean you have to import every single thing they do. But there are lessons there that we can take, certainly, and things that can be admired and learnt from, without a doubt.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think far too many, and if I could be rude right now, please forgive me. I think there's not enough reasoning in our industry. You know, as you've just said, James, taking what's out there and reasoning with that in a different context. How could I use those ideas in my context? How could I use those ideas with my clients? I do believe that, you know, a lot more reasoning with ideas that's out there rather than reproducing what's out there. Start to reason with it in your context, with who your audience is and what your identity is.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I loved what you were saying yesterday when we were having a coffee as well about the kind of the fitness industry looking outside of our industry now and learning from you know, other areas of leisure, you know, hospitality, customer service, retail, you know, all that kind of thing, to actually create a better, and again, it's that word, isn't it? A better experience for the customers. Yeah.
It has to be about the experience. Products and services support the experience. Products and services are not going to go away. They just support the experience. And I do believe that we need to look outside at hospitality, at retail and entertainment, you know, and I started to have a go at that myself a few years ago when I started to realize that I could lose a class to a PowerPoint projector on the wall. I was outraged. I didn't sleep for a week thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose a class to a PowerPoint projector. I can't even argue with someone, you know. And so I went away and I looked outside the industry, and I've done courses in stand-up comedy, which I'm absolutely rubbish at, but I learned so much from. And I've done a few courses in acting, and I do not want to be an actor. I love this industry, but I just think there's so much more that's outside of our industry that instructors could try to see how they can create their unique experience for their clients, their customers, their end users. And I think the more we do that, the more end users we will get enjoying our industry, because there is a distinct difference. If all we've got is fitness is, let's just put it out there right now, right? Fitness is free. It's against my human rights to pay for fitness, right? If all I've got as an instructor is fitness, I'm in trouble, right? Because it is free. Yeah. There must be something more, because you can get, it's free, you know. And I think if anyone is a member, is a client who's listening to this, try other trainers, see what they've got, you know, see what their identity is, what their culture is, and how that comes across in their planning, their delivery, you know, their websites, their social media. I just think there's more out. You know, if all we've got is fitness, we're in trouble. As
I think
not in terms of sport. Sorry,
yeah, I was about to say, me and Peter came from different industries before, and I think if I'd come in straight from university into the fitness world, I would have missed out on quite a few different kind of skill sets, which I developed through other things, which I now apply to clients without thinking. It's not to say I wouldn't have acquired them, because we work with a lot of people. I mean, James, you've done fitness all your life as well, but you've been one of the reasons why, I've always admired you, James, is that you've always thought outside your industry, and you've always tried to kind of improve yourself beyond just the training aspect of it. And I think there's a lot of trainers out there, and I got it on the phone call a few days ago. So I can go to someone else and it's only £25 an hour, and I said, well, they know their value. It's that they may have just come out of university and that's the first thing they do, and they may be great. It's not to say they're not, but there's something to be said about having lived a little and seen a few different scenarios that allow you to judge things on a slightly different level, which may be more appropriate for most of the people we train.
Agreed.
Yeah. And what would you say, Keith, from your experience of, I'm just thinking, if we were just going to talk to an end user at the moment, how in your experience and in your sort of reading and education and everything, how do people, or what is the most important part of people actually creating an exercise habit or an exercise lifestyle, or something, not even exercise, just a more kind of healthy, active kind of lifestyle? What are the things that kind of will help people towards that, in your opinion? Because we know it's not this kind of accountability of someone paying for, a personal trainer once a week to do some exercise with them for an hour, doesn't often actually change their life in the way that they expect it might do. So for the end user, what are the most important things, do you think?
Well, wow.
It's a big question, sorry.
Find something and someone that you enjoy working with. And I consider enjoyment and fun to be two totally different things. For me, enjoyment is achieving what you wanted to achieve in a certain session or in a certain day and a little bit more. Whereas fun is like having a laugh and being amusing. So find something you enjoy. Try many different things. Take small steps. Yeah. Try and focus on, and this goes back to the American College of Sports Medicine guidelines many years ago. Focus on duration and frequency of exercise rather than intensity when you first start off. Only judge yourself, and this comes from, I think, Jordan Peterson, who's not everyone's cup of tea, but don't judge yourself on other people. Judge yourself on who you was yesterday.
Yeah.
Or as my mum used to say, don't go to bed as stupid as you woke up. And
was your mum a famous philosopher, or
no? She was just a girl. She was just a girl from East London, I do believe. There you go.
Best philosophers in the world.
Yeah. Take small steps. With everything. Don't do things you enjoy. Do things you like to do. Find someone who not only can help you write a program, but actually help you to develop yourself. It to me is about change. Change is the ultimate experience. There is no doubt about that. And I'm not talking about body transformation. I'm talking about a sense of self-belief, self-confidence. And this isn't my quote, and I do apologize for this. Whoever said it, I do apologize. There's loads of things on this call I should apologize for, to be fair. The more and more I think about it, and this shouldn't come across as being rude, that fitness is not the product anymore. The client is the product. because they should be the ones that change because of the environments that we create. So for the end user, find someone that creates an environment that you enjoy, or find a group exercise that you enjoy. Yeah, someone else said that. It wasn't me. In fact, anyone listening to this podcast, nothing I've said is mine. I have stolen it from someone else. So I do apologize for that. But those are the things, small steps. Judge yourself on who you was yesterday. Find things you like to do. Find some enjoyment in it, and find people who help you change. Because if you change, you're going to get that frequency and consistency of behavior, and there is no right way to do something. As long as the session that you're doing is safe and effective, you know, and you enjoy it, then just go for it. You know,
I think that's what you just said there about enjoyment and fun. So I did something ages ago, and it was all about a kind of balance, like life balance between fitness, family, what you do for money, and who you are.
Yeah.
Right. There was kind of like the 4 elements, which lots of people have done. There's loads and loads of different people out there who are trying to teach this sort of stuff. But what they miss out is what do you do for fun? What do you do for enjoyment? There's none of that in there. I mean, okay, you spend time with your family, that should be enjoyable, but it can be stressful as well, right? Jobs, lots of people are in jobs that they don't like. And then you get to a certain point in life, you know, so which I approached like a few years back and all that, get to like 40 and what have you. And then it's like, what do I do? What do I actually do for fun? What do I do for enjoyment these days? And it was nothing, because I was like basically getting up, going to work, getting home, going to bed, getting up, going to work, and then I started running and what have you, and I hated it and all that. But I was like, I need to get fit. No, but you know what I mean? It's like adding something else into your life that you don't really enjoy and all that. So I think that is huge. That is massive, because it's just going to create, if you don't do something and if you do something and you don't enjoy it, you just add into all that other crap that you got to deal with and all the other stress of all those other things, which seem to be like building up for people. You know, so you can actually start to break that all down and do stuff for enjoyment and fun again. And I think you get to a certain point in life where that becomes which is why people have midlife crises and stuff like that, isn't it? You know, because even if midlife crisis is a thing, I don't know if it should be called that.
I had one last night once James invited me to do this call.
Dear me.
Well, have you enjoyed it?
I don't normally do these things, Peter, to be fair. I believe in face-to-face delivery.
Yeah.
I truly do. I hate being recorded. I hate being videoed. Hopefully people won't find me in many places, really. I hate all this stuff. But do you know what? I have enjoyed it today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I think what we'll do there, I mean, we've probably got about an hour there. We'll start to wrap up. But that's been so, I'm really glad you came on, Keith, and shared some of your experience and some of your thoughts and some of your wisdom around, you know, 30 years in the industry, which is fantastic. Pete, do you have anything you'd like to sort of say in conclusion as we wrap up?
No, I just like what Keith just said there. He's actually enjoyed it, even though he hates this stuff. So that's a perfect analogy for people who are who want to get fitter and stronger, but like, I hate the gym and I hate this and I hate that. So you can find something that you'll enjoy. So, you know, there you go. And he also said, you know, you've done a few acting classes and stuff like that, but you're not very good. It's all right, you know, because like, you might be in the next Guy Ritchie film by the sounds of it. So, you know,
honestly, mate,
you'll go out there on this. If Guy Ritchie's listening, you know, we've got a guy right here. You've done comedy as well. So
I found my niche in life. I just being a gym instructor is lovely, and occasionally doing a bit of face-to-face learning and development is also lovely.
I like that though, because that goes with what's the book about the Kiwis? Is it Legacy?
Yeah.
And what you said right at the very beginning, actually, when you said if it paid well or it paid better, you'd do that. and that's all you do. And that's like the sweeping the changing rooms, isn't it? It's you said you're still cleaning the equipment and all of that, which is basically what your average 20-year-old will be doing and going, oh, I hate this. I want to move on from this. And it's like you still want to do it after 30 years. And that's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. So thank you very much. If anyone listening to this podcast, I said anything that was offensive, can I just say I do apologise?
We've had worse, don't worry.
Yeah.
I got tongue-tied over the female sport comment. I do enjoy it, and it is a shame that there isn't a lot more on mainstream TV. And so I apologise for getting tongue-tied over that.
No,
I'll blame Paul for leading me in that direction, to be fair.
No, it's all come across really well, Keith. It's been lovely. Paul, have you got anything you'd like to say in conclusion?
The key to our podcast is that we set the bar so low that every guest is always going to politely surprised by how it goes, you know. But no, it's funny because actually people have loads of different sides to themselves. I mean, I was speaking to a client who's been a client for about 3 years now, and I didn't realise she was in an amateur dramatics version of Kinky Boots. As singing and dancing. So I didn't know that. So people have these kind of background. That's the great thing about working with people is that you everyone has a different kind of life. You know, what they do in the gym is very different to the way they lead their lives, and it's a people business, I think, in the end. And you can't really hate people if you're in the fitness industry. I mean, it's great to enjoy programming and all that geeky stuff, which we all love doing, but really it's ultimately it's in its application, it's dealing with people. And I think you highlighted that very much today.
Just one last story, whether you use it or not. I was doing an induction, I think it was late last year, maybe in one of the weeks leading up towards Christmas, and I was taking an individual round the gym, and she said, oh, can you introduce me to an exercise that works this muscle? So I said to her, why don't I introduce you to the 3 most popular exercises for that muscle in the gym? And you can choose the one that you like the most. And her response was, ooh la la. That was better than any money in the world. That actually she had the chance to choose. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's fantastic. And I
we
know
gave her burpees.
And I like I'm afraid we need another whole podcast, Paul, on that particular exercise. Excuse me. We need a whole nother podcast on that particular exercise, I do believe. Let's not go there.
Okay. Maybe we'll have you back on then, Keith. That's great.
Oh, I very much doubt it, but thank you very much.
Keith, I know you're not really a social media kind of guy. If people did want to, you know, you're on LinkedIn, aren't you? People can find you on LinkedIn if they're interested in, training and the kind of the business side of it that you do.
So I am on LinkedIn, but I also am a partner in a relatively new learning and development company called Excelsior. So although I'm a partner in it, they will get they can catch me on there as well. So thank you very much for that. But no Facebook, no Instagram, no anything else. It's really not for me. Sorry.
No, but what
have you got the indoor toilet yet?
Yeah, we did have one.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
No, it's a fair comment, and really, I should be on it, but it's just not for me, you know.
No, I think I actually admire that a lot, and I think my life would be a lot more. I think all of our lives would probably be a lot more straightforward and a lot, without all of the social media that we're kind of on nowadays. But that's once the genie's out of the bottle, the kind of genie's out of the bottle, isn't it?
Isn't that the goal, isn't it? That you have to use these things, that you become a bit of a slave to them, but the goal is to actually not use them.
Yeah.
You know,
isn't it like, James, are you going to tell everyone where they can get this podcast?
I will do, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing. If you want to expand your reach, that's where people are. But I mean, it's like, what's it, Ed Sheeran and a few other people, they don't even have a mobile phone now, do they? They kind of, because they're that kind of, they're just done away with everything. And if the agent wants to get hold of them, they get hold of them, and they're trying to just shed all this stuff. But anyway, we are everywhere. We are on Instagram. we are on Facebook. We are on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Libsyn, YouTube, Facebook, everywhere. But thank you so much, Keith. That's been absolutely brilliant. We will be back next week with episode 79, which will be with Steve Cotter, who's going to be joining us from somewhere on the west coast of America.
San Diego.
So, what's that?
He's in San Diego, isn't he?
He's in San Diego, is he? Okay, yeah. We'll be joined by Steve Cotter next week, and then by we've got
Ben Morris.
Is it Yay Burpees?
He's called Yay Burpees. I wasn't going to mention that.
And then we've got Yay Burpees. I will just before
he's a nice
we go,
chap, though.
He's a lovely chap. Before we go, I just want to give a quick shout out to a friend of both Keith and mine called Mr. Martin Frost. I spoke to Martin today. He's been in the industry for 25 or 20 years ish, I think. Lovely guy. I spoke to him today. He's not been too well recently, but he will be listening to this podcast because I told him that Keith's on, and he's going to make sure he listens. So hello to Martin Frost. Again, someone who's been in the fitness industry for 20 years doing great work, lots of cardiac rehab, community groups, that sort of thing. He's a fantastic guy. So hello to Martin. Right, guys, if you'd like to join the Facebook group, go on to groups and find Health Oddity and ask to join, and we'll let you in. And we will see you all next week. Ta-ta. Well done. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Health Odyssey with Peter Lant, Paul Bassett, and James St. Pierre. To get your regular fix of hype-free health, you can subscribe and leave a review wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can find out more on today's and other topics at healthodyssey.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram by searching for Health Oddity.